what I've done, the only thing I've done so far is I built up the curb. That's just the 2x4s that I nail in. Quite a few. Actually, the curb I pulled out had 6 nails holding the whole curb down. So what I do is my first one, I toenail those into what I have the support over here as well as the support back here. I toenail those first down, and then 2, 4, 6, 8 on the bottom one, 2, 4, 6, 8 on the next one, 2, 4, 6, 8. So there's a lot of nails here. That curb is very stable, stiff, it's not going anywhere. That's all I've done on this so far, so you know. And then the same goes for the front. So the front end, again, gets folded on itself on the inside rather than the outside. And then, of course, you know, the excess that you have, you're going to make a very, very fine cut. You have to be very careful not to cut down too far. So what I normally do is I just put my finger here, know where my curb ends, and then I start my razor knife going up this direction. By the way, a razor knife is the best thing to use. A brand new blade put on there is going to be the sharpest possible, and that's what you want when you're dealing with this stuff, because you want it to cut the pan liner really well, rather than, you know, trying to push it through and making mistakes and stuff like that. So the sharper blade, the better. So I basically cut from this direction up, and then of course this isn't folded yet, so I just hold this up, and then from my cut, from my starting cut, I just cut upward like that, and then my excess flap of course goes here, and the other side goes around my curb. And I fold it the same way on the other side as well, you know, fold it on the inside. In this case, excuse me, in this case, I was about a 1/4 inch shy of where I wanted to cut. I actually wanted to cut more on the inside and get the pan liner to wrap completely around the curb, which is always the idea. So here I kind of screwed up a little bit. One of the things about pan liner, as opposed to the wood I was talking about earlier, where you can just start all over again, if you make the wrong cut on any portion of this, you literally have to start all over again. You can't really repair what you've done. Although, having said that, I have some extra pan liner somewhere. So, having said that, if I really wanted to get technical about it, I could get some PVC glue. They make it especially for this pan liner, this PVC pan liner. And I could glue on a little extra piece like that. You know, just cut it down to size and glue it on there, overlap, and cut it somewhere around here and make it nice and contiguous. But in this case, it's such a small area, I'm not worried about it. And the way that I build my curbs, it's irrelevant anyway. This will make no difference whatsoever by the time I'm done, and you will see why later. So in addition to how to build a pan, which is what this video is about, it's also how to build a curb. I've already got another video online about how to build a curb. I did a mock-up, but in this case it's real life situation. So as you saw earlier, excuse me, the curb is basically 2x4 stacks on each other, and this is actually 4 2x4s. In most cases I use 3, and the reason I use 4 is because there are 4 here to start with, and the reason is because there was a panel of glass which is way over there that needs to fit around. It's already pre-cut to go up this knee wall and back over, and it's a very specific measurement that I'm dealing with, and there's no way to get out of not doing what they had before. So they already had 4 2x4s set because of that panel, that one panel of glass that goes on the edge here. So I have to replicate what they did, unfortunately. It's a little higher curve than what I would like, but I don't have a choice. Okay, this is day 3. The shower pan is fully dry now. You can see it's all gray. There might be a little bit of moisture trapped below, but I'm not going to be doing tiling today. I've only done the prep so far on the walls and the curb. So that's going to give it another day to dry out. Yes, I do use green board. So all you other tilers out there that are hating me right now, I'm going to explain something about that a little bit later. So getting to the curb, as I kind of said that I was going to do, this is Durarock, and it's 1/2 inch Durarock. There's a video I have on my channel, how to build a curb, from a side view so that you can actually see the makeup of how it's done. And as I've said on that video, everybody has their own way, every tiler has their own way of building their curb. This is how I build mine. So you saw the process already of me wrapping my pan up around it and then screwing it down at the bottom. It is said you should never screw into your pan. It's very, very difficult not to, unless you build it out of concrete, brick, or Curb Perfect, which is basically Curb Perfect is for all intents and purposes a concrete curb, because it is like what do you call it, a mesh, for lack of a better term, plastic mesh that wraps around your 2x4s and your shower pan liner, and then has a little excess room, and then you just pour concrete in it. So in essence, we're doing the same thing here, except with Curb Perfect you don't have to screw into your liner. Having said that, it's not a big deal that I screw into my liner, and I'm going to explain why. The Durarock is what I use by default. You could use Durarock, Wonderboard, HardieBacker, whatever the case is that you want to use. So you can see I have 2, 4, 6, 8. I've got about 8 screws spaced pretty evenly throughout, and then on the inside as well there is about, well, I don't have as many. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there's about 5 screws holding the inside part in. Then the top part gets capped off, literally, figuratively and literally speaking, just like so. You get it nice and even, and once it's nice and even, then you can screw that down. So what I normally do is, you know, the same makeup I did on the outside, I do 2, 4, 6, 8, be about 8 screws going across the top. Then I'm going to butter it, and I'm going to butter it with thin set. I prefer the white thin set. It dries really hard. It's easier to spread than the gray, and plus I can see the difference as opposed to the gray material here. The white really shows up well. So I'm going to mix that up, and I'm going to butter my curb. That's going to do about 3 different things. First of all, it's going to cover all the heads of the screws. These screws are actually you know, into the material, countersunk into the material. So when I butter the curb, it's going to hide, well, it's going to embed the thin set into these countersunk screw heads, as well as these cracks both here on the inside over there, and in the corners. The second thing it's going to do is kind of make this curb sturdier and more contiguous. And then the third thing it's going to do is allow me to red guard this really well, so that I'm actually waterproofing my curb. There was a time that I actually would waterproof using red guard first, and then I would butter it, then I would red guard, but that's kind of too redundant, so I only do the practice of buttering the curb first, and then I'll red guard it afterward. So I will be back after I butter it. Okay, I finished buttering the curb. There's a little sunlight coming in here, hard to see, but if you can see, you know, I've put this thin set on the inside and the outside and on top of the curb, as well as around the bottom here. So I've completely filled in all the possible cracks that exist in the edges, as I said, the bottom, between 2 pieces of Durarock here, between the 2 pieces of Durarock out here, and the edges there. So all the cracks are filled, and if you notice, I also spread it out on my floor a little bit. The reason I do that, there's little inconsistencies. I noticed that this side was a little bit lower than that side, so I put a little bit more thin set over here, able to manipulate out my floor so it's prepped for the tiling process. So that's basically the way I do the preparation, and this is how I do the curb. In my other video, how to build a curb, this is the same exact process I went through, except that I can show you now, instead of a side view the way I did in that demo video, I can actually show you that this curb is completely buttered, so you don't see any screw heads anymore, you don't see any cracks between where the Durarock meets the Durarock, and it's all one big contiguous piece of curb that is very, very sturdy, and not going to have any damage anywhere. There will never be any water in my curb, ever, ever, ever. And the reason why is because I completely envelop this whole curb with red guard, 3 coats. I do 3 coats in the corners, all the corners. I do 3 coats. If I had a niche, I would do 3 coats in my niche. I do 3 coats around the curb, and I do 2 coats on the walls, all the way up to just above the shower head, including my wall. If I have a knee wall anyway, I'll put out RedGuard the entire surface of my knee wall out to here and then back down again. And I usually try and spread some out on the floor a little bit too, just because. So that's how that's done. Okay, I'm at a point where I have RedGuarded everything. You'll notice the center area where it slopes down to the drain, I did not RedGuard. People have asked me that before. Why don't you RedGuard all the way up to the drain? That way no water will ever get into your pan whatsoever. I'm not sure. Over the years I've debated whether or not I should do that. There are other people who feel as if you RedGuarded the entire thing and water somehow got into your grout and down onto the RedGuard, that it would set there and that it would create a mold sandwich is what they call it. So that mold potentially would still grow despite the fact it has nothing to eat or grow off of, I suppose. I don't know. You know, I would like to be able to pull out a shower like this at some point that somebody has RedGuarded all the way up to the drain. See what the result looks like years later. But I don't do that. Anyway, I do the perimeter all the way from the wall down out, I don't know, about 4 to 8 inches or so. The reason I do that is because when I have seen mold and mildew in showers, it's always at a point where the vertical meets the horizontal, usually around the perimeter. And you know, there's an egress, there's an area where the water is, say the water is saturated into the pan. Now you have air that's mixed to that, and this is a thicker area, so mold and mildew seems to be always prevalent around the perimeter. So I kind of negate that from happening by virtue of RedGuarding everything. No mold and mildew can get up past the RedGuard barrier that I put there. If mold and mildew happens, it's going to be just around this area, but this area is thinner as far as thin set and tile and all that stuff, and mortar. So I don't know, I just feel better about doing it like that rather than not doing it like that. And this is the final result of 2 layers of RedGuard. I think there might be 3 on here. I believe I painted 3. I definitely did 3 in the corners. So all these corners get 3. All these corners, the curb got 3 coats, and it's water impenetrable as we speak. Except for this area, of course. So if there was a way that I could take a shower or wet all this stuff down to show you that, the water would just beat off of it. Nothing would ever penetrate into this wallboard, ever, ever, ever. I'm very comfortable with that. Look how solid and thick this is. I mean, it's literally, and it's rubber. So as I was showing you about the dense board is basically, in essence, the same thing as what I've just done. The dense board has a barrier that's embedded on it prior to them selling it, of course. And what I've created here, for all intents and purposes, is dense board. There's a Curti-Schluter method, which is very expensive and very difficult to put up, but it's very expensive, which is the main reason that I don't do it. It's in essence the same thing as the RedGuard, but for a shower kit you're going to spend in excess of $300, $350 to use that on a shower, whereas RedGuard is $50 for a gallon. So it's much easier to put on, it's cheaper to put on, and the end result is still the same. You have a topical membrane on, which is basically all Curti-Schluter is. I do the outside on the floor, as I said I would, just because I see a lot of damage. I don't anticipate any damage from ever happening on the showers that I build, but you always err on the side of caution, and so I paint out a little further than I really need to off of the curb, just because if water does ever penetrate into the curb or outside of the curb or whatever, it's not going to ruin the floor just outside of it, and that's where I always see damage, just outside of the floor, the curb, or the corners of the curb. In this case, the corners of the curb itself, and the outside of the curb will never see any water underneath the RedGuard. So that's it. And that's how you build a curb, by the way. So I showed you the process as I was showing you this whole thing. And so this is a finished curb the way I do them. And, you know, it is what it is, and I'm ready to tile. So the next step that I'll be doing is setting the floor tile on here. I will do that today. It will take me probably about an hour and a half, 2 hours to set the floor tile. Not because it's that difficult, but because I make the small cuts around the drain. It takes up a little bit of time. So I'm going to set the floor tile. Tomorrow, then the floor tile will be dried enough to where I can grout it. I will immediately grout from wall to wall the entire floor. Then I will start setting the wall tile on top of that floor tile and go up from there. Okay, for the last portion of building a curb, if you noticed, I got all my tile in, and I'm actually, I think this is probably my last day. I'll be grouting most of everything except for this. I'll come back in the morning, grout this and set the toilet and final little touches. So let me explain this real quick. The tile itself is 23 3/4, I believe. So I'm doing a cut at 20 and a half actually, and then another cut at 20 and a half for the face of the curb, and so that everything's symmetrical as far as the curb goes. I can't match the lines of the floor because the floor is staggered and it would never work. On the back side, same thing. You have basically a 20 by 20 and a half. Whoops, there we go. 20 by 20 and a half going along the back side, and I'm having a hard time with this video. And with the same grout line in the middle there. So the only thing I've really done, except for setting the inside and the outside tile, oh, by the way, you want to shim up a little bit on these pieces here. I usually go about a 1/4 inch higher. So in other words, if this curb is 6 inches tall, for example, I'll go 6 1/4. That'll give me a little 1/4 inch so I have my natural slope. The back tile don't get sloped at all. They go flush with the top of the curb. And so what I was saying, the only thing I've done with the curb is I've set the tile, I buttered the curb itself, and then of course I back butter these pieces and I put them on there, move them around a little bit, and I shim them up. So that's the only thing I've done on the curb. My mud, mortar mix, if you will, not mortar mix, I'm sorry, thin set. My thin set goes on the top of the curb, and at an angle I just kind of, slop it on there, and then with a blade I just kind of sweep off the excess, so that I have a nice mortar bed going on right there. So you see kind of how thick it is. This is one of the reasons, and I'm telling you, the way I build my curbs, they will never ever ever have a problem. As you saw before, it's basically just 2x4 stacked, in this case 4 high, and normally I do 3, and then I have Durarock that wraps around it. I butter the Durarock all the way around, and then I paint the curb at least 3 times. You can't paint it enough. 3 times is plenty. No water will ever penetrate through this curb with the RedGuard on there. And then of course, the tile goes on there. And I try and have a contiguous curb top. I've mentioned those before in other videos, but they only really have 2 flavors. One is like a travertine, light brown, and the other one is white marble. And sometimes the marble has gray streaks and stuff. They're about $80. It's a 6 inch piece. This is 5 3/4, so that 1/4 inch on a contiguous would hang over here, and they're beveled, so I can't really rip the cut. So in this case, because these tile are so long, I just went ahead and I'm going to use this tile. Of course, I painted on the edge of it. I didn't do a bull nose. There was no point to do that. And then the other side, is just a straight cut. That goes right on top of there. I'm not setting it right now. Obviously, I have to back butter it. But that'll go right there. And then my other piece, oops, I got them backwards. That goes there. Then this goes here. So once I have these pieces buttered, I will set them in there, wiggle them around a little bit. And this one's kind of popped up because I haven't finished buttering with my thin set yet over here. But basically you get the idea. You get the idea on how the finished curb is going to look. And so you have one grout line. This will back up a little bit. So you still want a grout line over here, so don't push it up against the other tile. And then you have a grout line over there. And then one grout line in the very center is all you have. So any type of water penetration, if at all, would have to come through that grout line. Having said that, there's also a slope because, again, I bumped up a 1/4 inch here, so there's a nice little slope here. So when the shower door goes on, water will hit the shower door and follow right down, have no issue with it. And of course you saw earlier where I red guarded outside of the curb about 5 or 6 inches or so. So anyway, that's how a curb is built, and I hope that helps you. The other demo I have, how to build a curb, was a mock-up, and this is a real job that I'm doing. So I'm going to get back to work and finish this thing out. So the curb got done with same 12 by 24 centered. I think it's 20 inches, 20 and a half inches to center, 20 and a half inches to center. So we have one grout line. And of course the grout line doesn't match up with this because this is all staggered and it's a whole different thing.